Good morning. Welcome to the King's Report News Hour on the 16th year of Changi, the elite 6th month, and the 21st day. Yes, the 21st day by the heavenly calendar. I look at the calendar just 15 seconds before I start, but then when I actually say it, I have to look at it again. I'm sorry. Temelo sitting in for the second king of Cheongguk Gyeonggi-mun. Let's do our usual tour around the kingdom. And right now, in Chongpyeong, Tennessee, it is 67 degrees and partly sunny, getting up to 85 today, cloudy and humid. A couple of showers this morning, followed by a thunderstorm this afternoon. Tonight, getting down to 68, humid, partly cloudy. This evening, followed by areas of low clouds. And then at father's hometown of Jeongju in North Gyeongsang Province, in what is today North Korea. Currently 81 and mostly clear, getting down to 69 tonight, partly cloudy this evening, followed by areas of low clouds late. Tomorrow, very warm, humid, clouds, and breaks of sun, high of 87. At the Cheongguk Palace in Northeast Pennsylvania, it is currently 70 degrees and mostly cloudy, 88 for a high today, times of clouds and sun with a couple of showers and a thunderstorm, humid, and tonight, partly cloudy and humid, low of 65. At the Liberty Rock RV Park and Campground in Limestone County, Texas, 71 degrees and mostly clear. Today, high of 96, partly sunny and humid. Tonight, clear to partly cloudy and, yes, you guessed it, humid. At the Suncheon Palace in South Korea, currently 81 degrees and clear. Tonight, partly cloudy and, again, humid. And tomorrow, mostly sunny, hot and humid. it's a humid time of year, apparently. And in Gunma, the Gunma Palace is in Japan, mostly clear at 86 right now, partly cloudy. Tonight, 72. Tomorrow, partly sun, hot and humid with a thunderstorm in the afternoon. And in Ilan, Taiwan, in the Republic of China, it is currently 87 degrees and clear. Tonight, clear to partly cloudy, low of 76. Cloudy, a shower in spots in the morning, followed by a thunderstorm in spots in the afternoon tomorrow. They don't say humid, but based on the reports from the king, you don't need to say humid. I mean, Taiwan is just, it's like, you don't need to say that there's air, all right? It's always humid. It's, humidity is not in the forecast, but is there air? Yes, then it's humid, okay. Then let's see here. Right now, actually 87, and the real feel is 100 degrees right now. Yeah, okay, so it's pretty humid. Anyway, yesterday the typhoon, or I guess it was a typhoon, went through, but I think it was a pretty small typhoon. And anyway, the reports say that one person is missing. About 100 people or so were injured, but it looks like the damage was fairly limited, and nothing about uh, the property where the king is located being damaged at all. So that is good news. That is good news indeed. Okay. So let's go to Father's Word. Let's see here. Today we are in the book on the true God, true God, true God. Here in chapter 2, God's 창조 역사. 역사 sometimes confused because it translated as history, but also spiritual work. And I think here we're talking about God's work of creation, I think is what this is talking about. And chapter 2 and section 3. Uh, so, and Father, 1991, on November 21st. So then, this is, I guess, obviously part of a longer speech, and we're just, this paragraph is taken from that speech. Does God like to be kissed, or does he like to kiss? The incorporeal God, 무형의 하나님. So 무형, in other words, literally without shape. But I guess we call that the incorporeal. The God who is without shape. Two are stuck together, so he does not experience any impetus or any 자극, any, you know, what do you call impetus? anyway, there's no. I'm sorry, I gotta do this. Fixed. Oh, no. Stimulate. That's what I'm looking for. Stimulation. There's no stipulation because God has, his dual characteristics, but the two are stuck together, Father says here. And so there's no stimulation. So when you love, you become one, you separate, and you go back and forth, right? When husband and wife, when husband and wife love each other as if their lives depended on it, well, he's going to get a bit graphic here, right? They make a lot of noise, okay? And they love each other as if lightning is crashing down. Okay. And then later on, just like after the rain stops and the clouds clear away, they go back to the 0 point, and they go back to the 0 point. So it all sort of cools down later on. Okay, we know what he's talking about. All right, maybe some of you don't, but if you don't, then maybe if you're not blessed, then probably don't know what you're talking about. But you know what you have to look forward to anyway. Yes, like thunder and lightning crashing down. Okay. So anyway, yes. moving on quickly. Okay. Let's see here. So yes, we're interested in the meeting between Putin and Trump in Alaska on Friday. This is tomorrow now, and it's going to take place at a military base on the outskirts of Anchorage. Apparently, it did not like my idea of doing it in someone's living room on a Diomedes Island there. All right, that's why I'm not in the White House. And President Trump he made this statement: very severe consequences on Russia if Putin doesn't agree to end the war. But hold on, those, because he's going to backtrack on that a little bit later. Trump promised very severe consequences on Russia if President Vladimir Putin doesn't agree to end his war in Ukraine during the two leaders' meeting on Friday. There will be consequences, Trump just said during an interview at the Kennedy Center in Washington. Asked if that meant new sanctions on tariffs, Trump demurred, so forth, and they go into the background. But then the New York Times publishes a story saying that hours after presenting a united front with allies, and President Trump he had a meeting with Europeans and with Zelensky on the phone, and he said, "Yeah, I'm not going to negotiate away Ukrainian territory. If Ukraine's going to give up any territory, then it's the president of Ukraine or Zelensky who needs to do that. And so I'm not going to do that." So basically, then the Europeans came away thinking, okay, yeah, we've got his word on that very important point. The Europeans have been saying that if there's going to be negotiations about Ukrainian territory, then Zelensky needs to be there. And in this case, he's not going to be there because Putin refuses to meet Zelensky. He will only meet Trump alone. And then Trump warned Putin of severe consequences if Russia refuses to end the war. But he also suggested that he has limited power to alter the Russian leader's behavior. So President Trump is going back and forth, and we see him doing this quite often. But he eventually, though, hones in on what's most important. I think. Here, President Trump on Wednesday suggested that he was powerless to control President Vladimir V. Putin of Russia ahead of a planned meeting on Friday in Alaska, saying he could not convince the Russians to stop killing Ukrainian civilians or hacking American court records. Mr. Trump did warn of severe consequences if Mr. Putin did not agree to abandon his grueling invasion of Ukraine during their discussion scheduled to be held at Joint Base Elmendorf Richardson in Anchorage. But Mr. Trump was dismissive when asked to address matters of national security and the horrors of war, raising questions about whether he has the leverage or the will to convince Mr. Putin to end the invasion. So here, raising questions, so forth. This is a New York Times speak, of course, and they're trying to undercut President Trump's credibility. Asked whether he could convince Mr. Putin to stop targeting civilians, Mr. Trump said it was a discussion he had already had with Mr. Putin. Russian forces have pounded Ukrainians with drones and missiles, sending civilians scrambling for shelter. Mr. Trump and Mr. Putin have spoken at least 5 times since Mr. Trump was sworn in for a second term in January. So that's 5 times in less than 7 months. And Russian forces have pushed forward all the while. I've had a lot of good conversations with him, Mr. Trump told a reporter during an appearance at the John F. Kennedy Center. We don't need the rest of that. Then I go home and I see that a rocket hit a nursing home, or a rocket hit an apartment building, and people are lying dead in the street. So I guess the answer to that is no, because I've had this conversation. Mr. Trump struck a similar tone when asked if he had seen reporting in the New York Times on Tuesday that Russia was behind a widespread breach of federal court systems. The system that was exposed holds highly sensitive records with information that could reveal sources and people charged with national security crimes. Are you surprised? Mr. Trump said that's what they do. They're good at it. We're good at it. We're actually better at it. He was also asked if he planned to bring up the reporting with Mr. Putin, but did not answer. Okay, so that's enough of that. Now, I think what President Trump is doing, though, here is that he's has in mind, and I think this is how it's going to play out. They get together. Putin says, "No, I'm not going to stop the war," or he says he is going to stop the war, and then he goes ahead and, before President Trump can get back to Washington, he bombs Ukraine again and kills more civilians. I expect that, or something like that. Either he says he'll stop it, but then keeps on going, or he says he will not stop it and keeps on going. Anyway, keep on going. And then President Trump, I think, is going to impose especially sanctions on India and on China, which is more important actually than India. And I think it's a question of how fast Xi Jinping can open up his phone and dial Putin's number and tell Putin to, hey, listen, stop. We cannot afford this. Our sanctuary leader in Brazil was reporting today about the situation there. And we knew that President Trump had sanctioned one member of the Supreme Court in Brazil. And well, for anyway, we don't need to go into the reasons, but now apparently this Supreme Court justice in Brazil cannot use his bank accounts, and he has to be paid in cash. He has to collect his salary in cash. Imagine if people in China start finding that's the case, because Brazilian banks do business in dollars, okay, and as long as they do business in dollars for any part of their business, of course, they have their own Brazilian real, their own currency. But banks around the world, they do business in their own currency and in dollars. Here in Korea also, right? When I have money wired from the United States, it's wired in dollars. And then when it enters my account here, it's in Korean currency, so it's being changed by the Korean bank here. So if my Korean bank were to be sanctioned by President Trump or by the U.S. Treasury Department, then I would no longer be able to collect my money in the Korean bank. And but the Supreme Court justice's case is even worse, that he's being paid by the government or the government pay office in Brazil, but the bank that uh, he uses says, well, sorry, we cannot receive your money because we cannot do business with you, right? Because if we do business with you, then we're going to get sanctioned by the U.S. Treasury Department, and that will make us go bankrupt. And so I'm sorry, we cannot do business. We cannot. You'll have to find another way. And so now he has to be paid in cash. So I was thinking, if people in China, Xi Jinping, okay, well, Xi Jinping has a lot of cash stashed away, so it's not going to hurt him. All right, okay, but maybe some other people in China don't have quite as much dollars or their own currency stashed away, and so if President Trump would do something like that, I think this war could end pretty quickly. Pretty quickly. Chinese banks have got to be a part of the dollar system. So if he were to even threaten to take China off of the SWIFT system or the dollar system, as he has done to Russia, and as he has done to North Korea, then I think the war would end pretty quickly. So I think it's going to take something like that. Putin is going to call President Trump's bluff, and President Trump is going to have to show him his royal flush. That's what he's going to have to do. His royal flush. Here you got the ace, you got the king, you got the queen, you got the jack, you got the 10. Read it and weep. All aces. All right, so we'll see how that works out. Okay, so that's now coming up tomorrow. Tomorrow, Alaska time, I assume, or maybe Eastern time. I'm not sure. But anyway, yes. Okay. All right, so here, let's see here. Your BBC is actually talking about this possibility. Let me share this with you again. That U.S. warns of additional tariffs on India if Trump-Putin peace talks fail. And I'm sure China realizes that if India gets hit, then they are not far behind. And this article is being written from India, from Mumbai. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has warned that Washington could increase secondary tariffs on India. He said the decision would depend on the outcome of President Donald Trump's meeting with Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin in Alaska on Friday. And the Indian, is it Prime Minister or President? I think it's Prime Minister, isn't it? Modi has already said that I don't care. I don't care. No matter what they do to us, we're not going to bend to the will of the United States. Hey, anyway, he's said that he doesn't care. That's why I think China is actually more important. India, they will survive. They will survive no matter what President Trump does, and I don't think India has much leverage on Putin anyway, whereas China does. China has been supplying all sorts of weapons and stuff, and so I think China's leverage is much greater than India, far greater. We put secondary tariffs on Indians for buying Russian oil, and I could see if things don't go well, then sanctions or secondary tariffs could go up, Bessent said in an interview to Bloomberg TV on Wednesday. Earlier this month, Trump imposed a 25% penalty in India, in addition to 25% tariffs for buying oil and weapons from Russia. The U.S. has been trying to mediate a ceasefire between them. Okay, we got that again. Okay, President Trump is meeting with President Putin, and the Europeans are in the wings, harping about how he should do it and what he should do. The Europeans need to join us in these sanctions. The Europeans need to be willing to put on these secondary sanctions, Bessent said. Yeah, the Europeans, they talk up a good word, they talk up a good storm, but when it comes down to actual action, okay. Russian oil made up 35 to 40% of India's oil imports in 2024. up from 3% in 2021. And I think what really gets Trump, President Trump, is that India is buying this cheap oil and then selling it for profit on the international market. And I think that's what he's. Uh, but says here, oh, we're just poor. We're so poor, arguing that as a major energy importer, it must buy the cheapest available crude to protect millions of poor Indians from rising costs. But how come they're selling it? And apparently, the Americans have actually caught them selling it on the international market for profit. So something's going on there, right? All right. So we'll see what happens with that. Okay. Uh, Experts say India's refusal to reduce duties on agricultural and dairy products has been a major thorn in the negotiations. Well, it's still a largely agricultural country compared to other places. Trump's new 50% tariff rate on India is set to come into effect on 27 August, which some experts have said is akin to an embargo on trade between the two countries. It makes India the most heavily taxed U.S. trading partner in Asia and is expected to severely hamper its exports focused on industries such as textiles and jewelry, and could drag India's growth down by as much as 0.5%. Right? What about the call centers? Are they going to put tariffs on call centers? I don't know. All right, moving on here. Okay, so yeah, we're really praying about what is going to happen with that meeting in Anchorage. And as I mentioned previously, this is going to be a historic meeting, just like the Reykjavik, Iceland meeting between Reagan and Gorbachev is historic. So we'll see. The Reykjavik meeting, I believe, is often seen as kind of the turning point for Soviet Union, and kind of the beginning of the end. Well, maybe that was in '91. So I don't know. Well, that was in '86, I think. Anyway, yeah, it was kind of. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. It could be the end of Putin, but of course, we need to remember that both in China and in Russia, presidents come and go, leaders come and go. But it's not the leadership that is important here, really. It's more the regime. And so we'll have to see what happens. Right? Just see what happens. All right. Excuse me. Let's see. Of course, President Trump has put um, all sorts of federal agents and National Guard and so forth in Washington, D.C. I don't see this as such a wide-ranging story. I mean, crime, yeah, if he can clean up crime, then maybe Republicans in the next election will get 20% instead of 10% of the vote. But, I don't. So this is not really one of those stories that we're going to be talking about 50 years from now, I think. But yeah, it's pretty clear that this is happening primarily because the trigger for this happening was that this guy, Big Balls of the Doge organization, was targeted, or actually he wasn't targeted. He tried to help someone and was beat up as a result. And I think that's probably the reason that this is taking place. But it's about time. It's certainly about time. But uh, but it's a temporary fix, right? He's going to uh, he's going to reduce crime, so the criminals will go someplace else. They'll go to Maryland, probably. Not so much Virginia, I expect, but Maryland, and they'll do their stuff there. I think Maryland is probably a more crime-friendly state than Virginia, in my uh, impression, in my experience. PG County, perhaps they'll go there and do their crime. The homeless, again, the homeless, he's just treating the symptom, and uh, they'll be homeless someplace else, unfortunately, because he's not treating the cause. And I think homeless is a pretty clear example of where the cause is the family. Families should be taking these people in. Uh, they don't have families. Well, no children, no mothers, no fathers. Surely some of them must have families. A good number of them must have families. Right. And then if they don't have families, then communities, you know, community organizations. But it's not going to happen because still, the people who are running America, including President Trump, unfortunately, don't really realize how important the family is in solving all of these social problems. Fentanyl, again, family. Homelessness, family. Crime, family. Hmm. You can go down the list. And this is why we emphasize the importance of the family. United Launch Alliance's new rocket lifts off on first Space Force mission. Okay. All right. Yeah, are they going to be, are they the ones that are going to build the nuclear reactor power station on the moon? Because so that's, I don't know if it's these people or not. Right. Zelensky says Putin is bluffing ahead of Trump's summit. He may be, but coming from Zelensky, he's not a very objective source. CCP cyber sabotage escalates. U.S. changes posture. U.S. cyber officials indicate cyber adversaries will no longer be allowed to walk all over the United States. Well, that's nice. Why did it take this long? Let's take a look at this story. Catherine Young, once considered merely an economic thief in cyberspace, the Chinese Communist Party is now seen by the U.S. military as its top cyber threat and pacing adversary, capable not only of an espionage but also potential sabotage of lifeline systems. More than a dozen cybersecurity annual reviews and 2025 trend reports sound the alarm on the regime's increasingly sophisticated cyber capabilities, with one even crowning 2024 as the inflection point in Chinese cyber espionage. The recent large-scale hacks into U.S. critical infrastructure and telecommunications networks that went undetected for months, if not years, seemed a far cry from the unsubtle brute force cyber activity of earlier years and brought new attention to the issue. The shift on the regime's part was not sudden, but rather the natural outgrowth of some 30 years of heavy investment in the cyber sector. The United States has also undergone a shift in its understanding of the regime and is now intent on pushing back. So, so when the United States is strong, then obviously there are going to be people who are trying to figure out how to weaken us. Yes, and so for 30 years, that's right. They're saying, we're going to beat these guys. We're going to beat them, and so that's what they've been working on. Whereas the United States has been complacent because, hey, we're number one, we're number one, we're number one. America is number one, and all that kind of stuff, right? And been very complacent. In 1996, Kevin Mandia was a special agent at the Air Force Office of Special Investigations when he saw his first Chinese state-sponsored cyber campaign infiltrate 27 or 37 military bases unencumbered. There's a story that the cybersecurity executive has shared in many public talks, including one at the RSA conference in April. Mandia saw the Marine Corps, Army, Air Force, and Department of Energy breached on day one of the CCP-backed campaign as remote actors gained access via a West Coast university with legitimate credentials belonging to several former Chinese international students whose accounts were never closed. It showed the systemic nature of a state-backed campaign. According to Mandia, a division of labor was evident in the hack. One person or team was tasked with testing of credentials, and another with the exfiltration of data. The CCP People's Liberation Army has had cyber units since the 1990s, whereas it was not until 2009 that the United States established U.S. Cyber Command, or Cybercom, to unify cyber operations. The CCP has long considered cyberspace a theater of war, much like land, air, and sea, and space, by the way, but early Chinese state-backed cyber activity against the United States was better understood as an economic espionage, something done to bolster Chinese companies with stolen trade secrets. Even so, it was not until a groundbreaking report published by cybersecurity company Mandiant in 2013 exposed a Chinese hacking group as the People's Liberation Army's Unit 61398 that the U.S. private sector took seriously the threat of a foreign nation state at its door. The report identifying the exact buildings the hackers worked out of and the identities of some members of the unit detailed how the group had stolen data from 141 companies across 20 industries since 2006. We did it to genuinely push the agenda of China's literally hacking everybody and nobody knows it, Mandia, former CEO of Mandia, said in a RSA conference. CCP leader Xi Jinping, whose tenure has been characterized by openly aggressive competition against the United States, stated his intention to have the regime become a superpower in cyberspace a few years ago after he came to power in 2015. Official speeches and documents outlined the need to secure cyber power as a pillar of economic, national, and military security. The same year, Xi stated the regime's renewed focus on the CCP's strategy of military-civil fusion, which blurs the lines between technologies for commercial use and for military use, emphasizing the lack of a true private sector in communist China. In a decade since, the CCP's investment in cyber capabilities has been unmatched. One example is the hacking competition landscape in China, which provides hands-on experience, knowledge sharing, and career paths for an ever-growing industry of hackers. An Atlantic Council analysis of Chinese capture the flag hacking competitions, which do not include competitions focused on vulnerability exploits, describes the ecosystem as unparalleled in size and scope, something akin to 4 overlapping national collegiate athletic associations, each with their own primary government sponsor, just for cybersecurity students to exercise their skills. The regime is also a major buyer in the cyber offensive industry, which ensures that it has a steady pipeline of software exploits to acquire, according to another Atlantic Council report. It is an environment in which even local branches of the regime have cyber units carrying out operations. Paul Rosenzweig, a cybersecurity expert and former Deputy Assistant Secretary for Policy in the Department of Homeland Security, said the time and money that the Chinese regime has poured into cyber has put it very much on an equal footing with the United States in that sector. The two nations' approaches also differ drastically, he said, pointing to recruitment techniques wherein a hacker arrested in China may be given a government job instead of a prison sentence. The best 10,000 cyber operatives in the United States are better than the best 10,000 in China, Rosenzweig told the Epoch Times. But if the United States has 10,000 cyber operatives, China has 1 million. Cybersecurity researchers say Chinese state-backed cyber activity has been more difficult to detect as of late, which indicates not only a fine-tuning of techniques, but also an increased emphasis on operational security and infrastructure management in these organized campaigns. David Stellin, CEO of Telecommunications Industry Association, was running a venture-backed company in 2002 when he had his first encounter with Huawei. The Chinese telecom giant had stolen some of the company's technology. Years later, when Stellin was CEO of a publicly traded company, Huawei would outbid his company for contracts around the world by 40% or 50%, selling below cost and making it impossible to compete. It is not the case that the U.S. public or private sector had no awareness of the CCP's malicious cyber activity until recently. Rather, for many years, there was simply no recourse for hacked businesses or officials. The work to shore up cyber defenses largely falls on the private sector, which bears the brunt of the hacks. Industry is rising to the challenge, but looks to the government to take the lead on an issue that has risen to the level of national security. Lawmakers, officials, and experts around the world had raised national security concerns about Chinese telecom services, including Huawei, by the early 2000s. But it was during the first Trump administration which named Huawei ZTE telecom equipment as a threat to national security that Stellan said he saw a real shift begin. At the time, 1/3 of the world was using Huawei technology. 1/3 of the world was using trusted technologies, and another third had not yet made up its mind, Stellan told the Epoch Times. The Trump administration not only made the choice for trusted technologies at home, but also engaged countries around the world to, number one, tell them about the risks, and number two, show them a path to a more secure network, Stellan said. The first Trump administration recognized that we need more trusted technology in the communications infrastructure around the world, Stellan said. In today's connected world, where nearly all internet traffic travels through subsea cables, breaches in other countries can result in vulnerabilities to systems at home as well. Defense experts and critical infrastructure industry veterans broadly credit President Donald Trump and his first administration for the nation's recognition of the CCP as a cyber adversary. This finally opened a path for a coordinated solution. In 2018, Trump issued the nation's first cybersecurity strategy since 2003 to make America cyber secure. Since then, the United States risk surface had only grown. As the world became increasingly connected, persistent adversaries scouring for an unguarded entry point had ever more options. Telecommunications networks are especially high-value targets, being subject to both cyber espionage and potential cyber attacks, and there had already been well-documented cases of Chinese state-owned telecom companies rerouting US or European data to China. As the United States committed millions in taxpayer dollars to spend the next decade ripping out these untrusted technologies, the industry also began to overhaul its approach to security. TIA, which views itself as the trusted association for the industry, set about preparing measurable standards with which to certify products and services in the telecommunications sector. With the expertise of volunteers in its 400+ member companies, and with buy-in from the United States and other governments, TIA published the first cybersecurity and supply chain security standard in 2022. It issued an update in 23. Organizations have started to shift from being reactive to being proactive, Stellan said. Security needs to be embedded into this digital transformation that is going on for some time and will continue for some time, starting with a deep understanding of how companies make products and the subsystems that they use and the chips that they use. Terms such as zero trust architecture, defense in depth, and secure by design reflect this shift in approach. Best practices dictate that a company builds security into the product or service development process from the beginning and prepare for the event of a breach. The approach incorporates multiple layers of security to contain any potential breach and employs continuous monitoring and threat hunting within the system. Can you trace the software all the way back to its source? Stellan said. How quickly do you fix a problem when you have a problem? How do you know that the chips you're using are not counterfeit chips? Are you, as a company, a trusted supplier? We're not just throwing it up in the air and saying trusted or not trusted. No, these are measurable elements that we use to evaluate trust. But this defensive posture shows that the CCP has put the United States on the back foot, experts repeatedly told the Epoch Times. Given enough time and resources, which the CCP's cyber operatives have had in spades, any system can be penetrated. Okay. Given enough time and resources, which the CCP's cyber operatives had in spades, any system can be penetrated. Beijing hit hard as US networks began their transition in security strategy. 10 years after the Mandiant report sparked recognition that China-based hacking campaigns against the United States were in fact state-sponsored, Microsoft disclosed a stealthy and targeted malicious CCP-backed cyber campaign aimed at U.S. critical infrastructure, which it dubbed Volt Typhoon. In a May 2023 report, Microsoft detailed how Volt Typhoon had been active since mid-2021 and affected organizations in the communications, manufacturing, utility, transportation, construction, and maritime, government, IT, and educational sectors. It highlighted the campaign's emphasis on stealth with techniques that mimic legitimate activity so as to avoid detection for as long as possible. Microsoft assessed with moderate confidence that Volt Typhoon was also pursuing capabilities to disrupt the critical infrastructure in the event of conflict. The need for increased protection that came with heightened awareness had prompted the disclosure. A year later, FBI head Christopher Wray told lawmakers that Volt Typhoon was pre-positioned for disruption. A fuel shortage caused by a 2021 ransomware attack on Colonial Pipeline had already alerted the nation to what cyber-enabled disruption of critical infrastructure could mean. Volt Typhoon's stealthy approach and its potential goal of disrupting critical infrastructure were markedly different from what CCP-backed hackers had previously demonstrated, and it was only one of several new campaigns. Salt Typhoon targeted telecommunications networks and made away with government communications. Flax Typhoon alerted the world to the risk of Chinese-made manufactured consumer electronics when some 200,000 devices, including cameras and Wi-Fi routers, were hijacked to create a network or botnet with which to carry out cyber espionage operations. Silk Typhoon's breach of Microsoft Exchange servers was so pervasive that it prompted the United States, the UK, and the European Union to issue their first joint statement condemning the Chinese regime's cyber activities. The US Justice Department requested a court order to allow the FBI to remove malware from tens of thousands of civilian servers. In July, Microsoft named two more CCP-backed campaigns involved in stealing data from SharePoint servers. The Typhoon designations are what Microsoft uses to track CCP-backed campaigns, but different security researchers use other names. Salt Typhoon, Volt Typhoon, there's just a legion of possible avenues here, Rosenwig said about the campaign's potential for disruption. It is reasonably apparent that the Chinese regime may be looking for something to hold as surety against potential U.S. action, he said. Jeff Hoffman, senior cyber fellow at the Gold Institute for International Strategy, told the Epoch Times that with these various new campaigns, the CCP is really on the move in terms of exploring where there may be vulnerabilities and to show that it has a presence. How is this different from nuclear weapons to show that they have deterrence, he said. That's interesting. I wonder if, with regards to the Ukrainian situation, if President Trump says, okay, I'm going to put in secondary tariffs, will Xi Jinping, instead of calling Putin, will he call Trump and say, hey, how much do you really need electricity? How would you like to go without electricity? How would that, or he could do sort of a demonstration, right? He could shut down the network in maybe a part of the country or something like that. I don't know if he's capable of doing that right now, but if he is, then that could be a scenario that could play out. So we'll see what on this Friday. Things are going to start rolling, I think, after this Friday. Stakeholders began to ask whether the United States would hit back. I don't think American people realize the extent to which our telecom systems have been deeply compromised, Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri said at a June congressional hearing. What are we going to do to get them out of there and protect the American people who right now are sitting ducks? At the same hearing, Senator Eliza Slotkin, Democrat of Michigan, said, I want to do offensive cyber. I want to make them feel pain for the Russians and the Chinese that are launching these attacks. Sanctions are no longer a deterrent, and it is imperative for the United States to show that it has a response, Hoffman said. See, sanctions are no longer a deterrent. If China does go beyond pre-positioning and does what Iran has done in Israel to actually have an impact on industrial control systems, say in a water treatment plant, if that does come to a disruptive level, what is our response? He said, we need to develop that policy. We need to thank President Donald Trump on his leadership. Immediately when he was inaugurated, he renewed the national emergency to mitigate, deter, and defeat foreign adversaries in cyber, and that includes China. Hoffman said he sees a likely Trump-Xi meeting as a prime opportunity for this administration to make its position clear. The president has said that although a trade deal with China is not imperative, he expects to strike a good one and is likely to meet with Xi before the end of the year. The Trump administration's new cyber officials have also committed to showing adversaries that cyber activity against the United States is unacceptable. Alexei Bulazel, senior director for cyber at the White House National Security Council, said at the RSA conference in May that while deterrence as defined during the Cold War does not work in cyberspace, there are ways to degrade adversary capabilities and impose costs on intrusion attempts. Not responding is, I think, escalatory in its own right, Bulazel said. If you continually let the adversary walk all over you, they hack you and you do nothing, and they hack you, that in itself sets a norm. We need to find some way to communicate that this is not acceptable. Longtime FBI agent Brett Leatherman, promoted in June to lead the agency's cybercrime division, stated in the announcement that his charge was to make malicious cyber activity against the United States unsustainable. Incoming National Cyber Director Sean Carncross said during the Senate confirmation hearing that the dilemma the United States faces in cyber needs to change. Our enemies do not see a cost in engaging in this behavior, so they impose strategic dilemmas on us now, and they have for a long period of time, he said. It's time that we impose those dilemmas on them. I look forward to working to do everything I can to make sure that our adversaries, our enemies, and criminals operating in this space know that this is not a cost-free endeavor. All right, that's the end of the story. So, a story like this can really make you think, "Wow, we're cooked. we're really in trouble." And well, in one sense, that's true, except that guess what? There is a God. And if God did not exist, we'd really be in trouble, but there is a God. And the king is right now setting conditions for the downfall of the Chinese Communist Party, not just the downfall of Xi Jinping. I want to say again, Xi Jinping's downfall, I think, will actually extend the lifespan of the CCP, because they will just bring in a new guy and they say, all those bad things that you Chinese folks hated, all you citizens of China, all that stuff that you hated, the crackdowns and everything like that. That's all his fault. That's all Xi Jinping's fault. But now we got a new guy, and he's going to reform. And see, the Chinese Communist Party, we are capable of reforming ourselves. So you don't need to worry. You can continue to support us. This is what they'll say. And unfortunately, a lot of people will believe that, I expect. As I've said, this is exactly how the Japanese party, the same almost the whole time since World War II, one party has been governing Japan, the Liberal Democratic Party. And when their poll numbers go down, they just switch they just put in a new guy. Okay, right now, Ishiba, who's the prime minister, it looks like he's coming to the end of his tenure pretty soon, and they'll just put in a new guy. And when they do that, their poll numbers will go up. They've been doing that now for more than 70 years. Oh, almost 80 years now. So bringing down Xi Jinping is not enough. The whole regime has to go down, just as it did in the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union still has Russia still has a communist party, but it's kind of on the sidelines now. And maybe China will continue to have a communist party, but we need someone new, a new regime in China that is going to, maybe stop doing this kind of stuff, and also, liberate North Korea. All right. But yeah, we'll get there. Let's not worry too much. All right, let's see. Let's look at the headlines here in Breitbart. Melania Trump, she's not somebody you want to go to war with. And it looks like Hunter Biden is going to find that out pretty soon. Melania Trump puts Hunter Biden on $1 billion notice over alleged defamatory comments. Yeah, go Melania, go. Yes. She's been disrespected so much. I think She deserves every penny that she can get out of it. Yeah. And he just has to sell a few paintings, and yeah, there's not a big problem. He can come up with $1 billion, I'm sure. And former DNI Clapper told intelligence officials to compromise on procedures for ICA report, right? Because they wanted to block President Trump, even if it meant destroying democracy. And Dems hit new low. Now thinking enforcing the immigration laws is terrorism. Of course they will. Even though Obama himself said that, yes, America is a country of immigrants, but we are also a country of laws. That was Barack H. Obama said that. President Trump, Democrats are led by insane people. That's not even news. We know that. Thank you for reminding us. Walter's daughter, we don't care about Walter's daughter. 7 nations endorsed Trump for Nobel Peace Prize, President of Peace. I don't know. He's not going to get it. At least 7 nations across Middle East, Asia, and Africa. Who's missing here? Well, Europe is missing, isn't it? Have called for President Donald Trump to receive a Nobel Peace Prize, with the White House celebrating endorsements and proof that he is the President of Peace. Let's see about that. All right. Let's see. Founders relative with the woman, while under federal control, DC is not going to be a sanctuary city. Of course, so they're really going to town there. Border enforcement sees record-breaking lows in July. And Maxine Waters, she's still alive. And USC Director Joe Edlow says Biden plan was mass amnesty to change demographics of America. That's right. That's right. We knew that. Yuck. Oh, yuck. It's a pretty high yuck factor there. And U.S. grand jury indicts Haitian gang boss Jimmy Barbecue Cherizier. These people with colorful names. And let's see here. State Department restricts visas of foreign officials, tried to Cuban slave doctor programs, so forth. Okay. Okay. Ukraine peace summit should happen in Europe, says Macron. Yeah. How are we supposed to control it if it's going to be in Alaska? Oh boy. Collusion in Kentucky. Mitch McConnell is the senator from Kentucky right now. McConnell's allies, and he's retiring. So they're going to elect a new guy from Kentucky next year's midterm elections. Plot to take out Trump-aligned trash man Nate Morris. Does he have allies of longtime former senator, did he already quit? Oh, I see. Oh, former majority leader, that's right. Former Senate majority leader, yeah, he already stepped down from majority leader. And outgoing Senator Mitch McConnell have been caught colluding in a nefarious plot to take down businessman Nate Morris, the U.S. Senate candidate most aligned with President Donald Trump in next year's GOP primary, to replace McConnell. There is a fierce multi-way primary going on to replace the retiring McConnell in Kentucky next year. And much to McConnell's chagrin, the race has turned into a referendum against his legacy. It's so bad for McConnell that the Kentucky GOP, under serious pressure from Morris, abandoned a scheme this weekend to award McConnell the Lifetime Achievement Award at its annual dinner, headlined by MC Scott Jennings and Senator Jim Justice, Republican of West Virginia, instead just having McConnell give the reward to a longtime activist. Morris took issue with McConnell's presence even before the night began. In June, he criticized an invitation he received to the event that called for, let's try to get rid of these ads here on the side. Very, very disruptive, aren't they? To refrain of speaking ill Republicans. Okay, so anyway, this is, I guess, Kentucky state politics. We don't need to go too far into it. Okay. And Trump to host Kennedy Center honors, announces honorees: Sylvester Stallone, Kiss, Gloria Gaynor. And there, Trump invites media to ride along with DC police. We're going to be very open about what we're doing, right? Musk's AI labels Trump as DC's most notorious criminal. I expect that'll get fixed pretty soon. You know, I took a computer coding or computer programming course in college. I thought, yeah, well, who knows? This might be come in handy someday. So I took the course, and I think one of the first things I learned was garbage in, garbage out. And I think it's still one of the things that computer programmers talk about: garbage in, garbage out. And so this thing about President Trump being DC's most notorious criminal is obviously one of those cases where you got somebody's programming the AI with the garbage, and so you're getting garbage out. I didn't follow up on that programming thing though, unfortunately. Otherwise, hey, I'd be a billionaire today. Maybe, maybe. No, I'm happy with the way my life has turned out. Let's see here. Okay. All right, that's about it for for uh, for Breitbart. Okay. Let's see. Did we do? No, we didn't do Newsmax. Okay, that's Netanyahu. Okay, delivers defiant speech at Newsmax celebration. Vows to stop barbarians at the gate. Okay. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu did a deliberately forceful and wide-ranging speech Wednesday at Newsmax's fourth annual celebration in Jerusalem, declaring that most Americans reject Hamas lies and stand with Israel in its ongoing battle against what he called the barbarians at the gate. The Prime Minister's appearance was at a critical moment as Israel appears to be on the brink of a major military action in Gaza. Yes, he said that he's going to take control of at least Gaza City, if not the entire Gaza. And I still see conflicting reports on that, exactly what they're planning to do. All right. And it says two-state solution, more like two-state illusion. And he says, if anyone can bring peace, it's Trump. And maybe no one can bring peace. Have you thought of that? Maybe no one can bring peace. Unless it's with True Father's solution, which is what? Which is cross-cultural and interreligious marriage. That may be the only solution to this. I suspect it will be. Trump to Newsmax, severe consequences if no peace, right? U.S. pauses some Russia sanctions for summit. Yes, normally some of Putin's people would not be able to enter the United States, but they're being allowed to enter. So their sanctions against them are being temporarily suspended. And here, order reduces space industry regulations. So, all right, and then foreign-born U.S. population down 2.2 million under Trump. Interesting. And White House says National Guard is not arresting people in D.C. Yes. Yes, the military cannot enforce domestic laws, but I'm sure they're doing something there. And here, okay. Kerry Lake woke must be destroyed. Okay, so sorry. All right, that's about it for them too. Okay. All right. Okay, so praise God. Praise God that He continues to lead us into His kingdom. And there are ups and downs, but we are going to get there. I know. As I said, this meeting tomorrow is a historic one. So let's pray that God will give President Trump wisdom, and that He will also that He will work with Vladimir Putin. Remember, God, works with everyone. He's reaching out to everyone's heart, and let's hope that He can also work with the Russian delegation as well, and with the Americans. Because Trump is not going to be alone there. He's going to have a lot of his people with him, and let's hope that God can inspire each person there with wisdom for the sake of peace. For the sake of peace, right? All right, gotta go, and then I'll see you tomorrow. Tomorrow's Friday. Yes, tomorrow's Friday. So I'll see you tomorrow, uh, hours before the meeting in Alaska, I suppose. And on Saturday, perhaps we'll have something from Alaska that we can talk about. God bless Godspeed. May His kingdom come quickly.